We're going to have an open out for some more discussion now, and I'm sure many of you have questions that you might like to put to our panelists. Please do so in the Q&A function, and we'll just keep an eye on them and maybe combine a few at once. Feel free to do that whenever you like, but as we transition now, I'd like to bring Garry Deverell and Ray Minniecon into the conversation. Dr. Garry Deverell is the inaugural Vice-Chancellor's Fellow in Indigenous Theologies at the University of Divinity. And Pastor Ray Minniecon is a community pastor with St. John's Anglican Church in Glebe, where he leads the unique Scarred Tree Ministry. And Ray has been involved in many, many years now with the NAITS Indigenous Learning Community. So Garry and Ray, great to have you with us. And I might start by just throwing a question out there and seeing who feels like responding. You've both been involved in pastoral ministry and are keen theological thinkers. And I'd like to ask you something around narrative and the formation of community. So how has listening played a role in your ministry? What's the character of listening within your ministries and pastoral experience?
Well, look, Sam, it seems to me that that in order for communication to happen, especially, you know, across language barriers and cultural barriers and ethnic barriers and all the barriers that we put there and live with, that there has to be both speaking and listening. I think the problem often with communication is that there's too much of the speaking and not enough of the listening, eh? So it seems to me that that listening is pretty fundamental, but there's various kinds of listening. Sometimes people think they're listening by just kind of tuning in with one ear, but actually having their attention in another direction. So when something comes up in the conversation or the conversation you're listening into, which seems to be of direct relevance to oneself, then you tune in, you know. But the rest of it, you're kind of not really attending to, you're not really listening to. I don't think that's really listening. The way I understand listening is very much determined by the way that a Jewish philosopher named Emanuel Levinas talks about listening. And that is, you come to the conversation, you come to the moment of communication with a fundamental commitment to what the other person is trying to say, a fundamental commitment to the world that the other person is coming to you out of. So it's a kind of discipline of trying to put aside your own world, your own perspective, just for a little while, and listening very, very carefully for not only what the words seem to be meaning, but also what they might be meaning coming out of the kind of larger world of the other person. And so that's actually really hard. That's really hard to do, because I think modernity and you know, Western culture is not very good at that, and we've all been colonized into that, whether we're aware of it or not. And so this deeper listening, what one of our famous aunties talks about in terms of Djangirrawuy, you know, listening more deeply, waiting longer, attending more carefully, listening to the country out of which the voice comes, all those sorts of things, is a lot harder. And I think that genuine pastoral ministry, if it's going to be genuinely pastoral, has to do that kind of listening. Because otherwise you can just project what you think people are saying onto what they're saying, and you don't actually hear what they're saying, you know. So let's just leave it at that.
There's an interesting character to listening in many Indigenous communities, isn't there? Listening is very much an attending to and trying to understand the connections that one has through what's been given to you. I think there's some important lessons for theology here too, isn't there? What would theology look like as listening more than speaking or thinking? That may change the character of what we're doing here a little bit. You've also talked about, Garry, I know you brought up Lebanon, so I'm going to go there. You've talked about the saying of God that might be heard right across human history, across human expression, culture, and perhaps theology as an attending to that saying that is given. How has that sort of idea shaped the way you've thought about theology, or is that a fair understanding of that's coming through in your book? Everyone should get a copy of that. I've got a copy here. If you haven't seen it, this is Garry's latest book, Gondarra Theology. Did you want to talk a little bit about that, Garry?
Sure, Sam. I think there's two basic ways to do theology. There seems to be a lot of folk who want to do theology in what I would call a kind of a closing down the conversation kind of way. And Levinar referred to that kind of way of doing theology as talking about theology as said, you know. In other words, we've sorted it all out, and all we're doing now is telling all you fellas what everything means, you know, what God has said, what you mean, what I mean, what country means, or whatever, you know. It's all closed down, it's all been sorted out, and really it's just a matter of proclaiming that. And usually this kind of theology is done by, you know, one group of people who reckon everyone else is wrong and they're right, you know, that kind of approach. I don't think that's theology. I think that's ideology, you know. To me, theology is an ongoing conversation where you're always in process. You're always saying, you know, in Levinar's term, you're always saying, you're listening to the saying of God, the dynamism of God, the ongoing conversation of God, the ongoing creativity of God, you know. And that creativity is at play in our relationships with each other and in what we can learn from each other. Because it seems to me that whether you're talking about the divine in Christian terms or you're talking about the divine in Indigenous or Aboriginal terms, what you're still talking about is a God who deigns to come amongst us and speak to us through ordinary stuff like dirt and rocks and human beings and plants and animals, all our kin, all our family. And if we listen to each other and we talk to each other, then there's a lot to be learned, not only about ourselves, but about our kin, whether they be human or four-legged kin or whatever. And we might learn that that God is in all of that stuff. And the divine is alive in all of that stuff. So that's the kind of conversation that's not dead. It's not, you know, we know everything and you fellas have just got to learn what we know, you know. It's that sort of conversational, relational stuff that's always on the go, always travelling, always in pilgrimage, always learning. To me, that's what theology is.
Yeah. Listening certainly isn't passive, is it? We're not simply sitting there recording information, but there's a sense that learning to listen is learning to listen in the way that it's an event that transforms, that is formative in who we are. And just come back to what Daniel said at the start, and his idea that who we are is being formed in the way we sit together, and that character of the way we're actually engaging, that character of possibly humility, grace, and truth, actually shapes who we are and the sorts of relationships that we have. Glenn, you've got your hand up there. Is that a...
You made the comment, Sam, that there's a quality of listening inside Aboriginal communities that is different or more magnified or changed than we're normally used to doing. I think it's a case of, my father would say to us, it's okay to not know what you're talking about, but don't open your mouth to prove it. And so you need to sit and to listen and to hear what is going on so that you begin to learn. And I think we are too quick to go into any of those environments, and even particularly in pastoral care environments, having a knowing of what needs to be done instead of listening to hear what needs to be done.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Ray, I'd love to bring you in here, and any sense of you of what is listening involved in your own ministry, or perhaps experience?
Listening and curiosity go together. For me, it's that, there's six questions that go with listening: who you're listening to, what you're listening to, why you're listening, where you're listening, when you're listening, and how you're listening. Those 6 hats that we talk about in other forums and in other contexts. So, yeah, the question is who you're listening to, what are you listening to, why, where, when, and how. And they all must be a part of the listening process. So for me, I've had to learn to listen to the pain of my people and the struggles of my people. And that's where I stuck my pulpit, right there in the pain of that, particularly the stolen generations. And for the last 40 odd years, that's all I have been doing, is stuck my pulpit there amongst that pain, and worked with our Kinchela men, and now I'm working with our Bomaderry children, and I've worked with other stolen generations in other parts of the country. And I'll continue to do that because I'm listening to them. And that's my choice, to listen to their pain and their struggle. And I'm a part of that. I know what it's like. The other part of listening too is where you're listening. And I've had to move my pulpit recently from amongst that pain from the streets and place that at the graveside now. And I've had to listen to my people from there, because we have so much deaths and so much dying in our communities. As I mentioned before, I've got to keep in contact with one of my Aboriginal pastoral brothers, because he's just done over 20 funerals for his last 2 to 3 months. And 4 of those have been suicides. And I know what's that like, because I've done a couple of those suicides myself this year, even during the pandemic. And I think it's the place where you listen also gives you an important way of understanding not just what your people are saying to you or you're saying to your people. For example, when I do a funeral service now, I never mention that they're going to a better place or they're going to heaven. That particular conversation has been deleted from anything that I say at a funeral service, because I don't know if there's a young person in there listening in and thinking, oh, well, if he's in a better place, I might go and join him. And so I've got to be listening to that. That's listening for me. It's listening to where we're at now, and listening to where we think our people are at, and what kinds of struggles and challenges that we hear there. Then what can we do about that? That's the other part of listening, is the praxis side of it. So if we're just listening, that to me is just a waste of my time. And I think it's a waste of everybody's time. To me, that's not theology either. And I think theology has really done us a great injustice by just listening to us. I mean, that's just stupid. Because if we're not doing something with it, then what the friggin' heck are we here for? What's God doing there? And are we listening to God even at the graveside? And, you know, one of the greatest blessings I've had with our funerals is to know that the only place that Jesus wept in the New Testament is at a funeral service. And so if he's weeping there at a funeral service, then he's weeping with us at our funeral services. And so I love going there to the graveside now, sticking up my pulpit there and listening to Jesus weep with me and cry and feel that weeping, because he knows what we're going through. Because he too was a colonized Jew. He knows what it's like to be colonized and to be brutalized by the colonizers. And he didn't look at trying to intellectualize that or come up with an academic understanding of it. He did a lot more of praxis rather than the intellectualizing of it. And so that's where I like to be listening, down there with the people. Yes, I'm listening to the land. Yes, all of those other kinds of things that we've mentioned here with my brother up there with Jumper, my brother. Thank you for your message again. It's really, really important. But what are we listening to in terms of our theology? I mean, are we listening to the ones who are filling our jails? Are we listening to all the deaths in custody? What are we doing about that? Are we listening to all those young children that make me weep every day, where they're being forcibly removed from their families as we speak and taken into foster homes? Are we listening to their mothers who are just crying and yearning to touch their children again, to hold them in their arms, and they can't get access to that? To me, that's God speaking to me. That's Jesus weeping at the graveside. And I need to hear him weep, otherwise he's useless to me. God is of no use to me if he's not weeping with me and crying with me and trying to make, to give some kind of a definition of what hope might look like. I mean, at that funeral service with Jesus, he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And that gave a bit more of a hope to the community at that time. And but here in our community, you know, I'm not going to see a resurrection from the dead. There is nothing's going to happen there. So I'm much more practical in the ways in which I think about theology. Yes, I study it. Yes, I go through all of those people. I could tell you if this is a person from, you know, an English theologian or a French theologian or a European theologian or an American theologian. They all have their own different slants to things. And it's interesting to listen to their voices. But I've got to then figure out of what use is that to me and my community. Can I go out with my pulpit at the graveside there and start preaching Mount Brookerman? Be useless. And so I've got to think of theology in terms of its praxis, because if it's not practical and liberating for our people, then we're still stuck in that really powerful text in John 10:10, which says, the thief comes to kill, steal, destroy. We're still stuck in that. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it in abundance. I have no idea, and I don't think my people do, of what he means by that. There is no meaning for it. And then when we approach the church to tell us what does that mean, we get this word reconciliation, and we're saying, well, what does that mean? It's got no meaning for us. And so I guess it's a big question of how do we translate all that we have, this knowledge that we have of who our Creator is, into something that is practical for somebody down there mourning the loss of a loved one. I mean, that's about as theological as you can get. And that's where your proof of theology needs to be exhibited in ways in which it can help our people get over that loss and through that trauma, because I know once they leave this particular cemetery, they're going to go to another cemetery next week to another funeral of another loved one, or maybe even the next day. And this pastor I was telling you about, who's in a community there with that many funerals, that he does one in the morning and one in the evening. I mean, what do you say to that pastor? You can't preach Brueggemann to him or any other great theologians on the planet. What do you say to him? How do you encourage him in his faith and his understanding of God is standing there beside you? All I can say to him is, Jesus wept. He's there beside you, my brother. He's in your community. He's weeping with you right now. And that's about as close as he'll ever get to Jesus, to hear a weeping Jesus.
There's a really, it reminds me that there's a really important tradition and heritage of Indigenous Christian leaders in this country that are fundamentally involved in things like equal pay and education, 1967 referendum, civil rights, that Christianity and faith, especially coupled in those years around the 60s and 50s with all those movements, civil rights movements, that there's a really interesting legacy here, that perhaps, do you feel that we talk about it enough, or is there something that the church today can do to reignite that sense that that faith is only known through doing?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's only known through doing. That's not what I intended to say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But praxis is a very much part of the faith of the biblical story. I think the thing in terms of colonization processes and all the things that have happened to our people, the greatest task I think theology has is actually to rip the Bible out of the white man's hand and retranslate it, because this book doesn't belong to the white man. It doesn't belong to the church. It never has. And if we can do that and reclaim the incredible message that's in there, we might be able to change the situation, not just within our communities and with our nation, but also with our creation. Like Glenn was saying there, he's really concerned about the ways in which his country is being destroyed, and rightly so. But who's listening? Is the church listening? Is that Anglican church out there going to get up and start marching around and saying, do not mind my country anymore? No, they're not, because they're not listening. And perhaps our challenge as theologians is do a big theological seminar with all the churches on how to listen to God and rip the Bible away from them and reclaim it as something that belongs to another group of people, another tribal group. This is their book. It's their story. It's not our story. It's not even an Aboriginal story, even though we can identify with its struggles and its challenges. And it's meaningful for us in that way. But, this is someone else's story, but it's very similar to our story. And we might not have had the ability to write the book in the words of that particular language, but the story is written, as Jumper Jimper has clearly shown us. The law, LAW, God's law, our law is written already in the land. And the moment you start mining it and ripping it up, you're destroying God's law. You're destroying it. And you don't need a book to tell you it's God's law. It's already there in this country anyways. I think the church, as well as Western theologians here in my country anyways, have got a long journey, not just in listening, because listening is one part of it. I don't think the disciples just listened. Paul just didn't listen. He went out and practiced. He did what he had to do to practice that. So we've got a long way and kind of decolonized, not just only theology, but the church, what we mean by the church. And I just wonder, how can Jesus love this institution that is so damaging to so many people, whether it be our Indigenous peoples, whether it's those who same-sex marriage, women. It's destroyed so many people. And I'm saying, Lord, why do you want to come back for this stupid thing? That's not a bride, and it's supposed to be pure. It's a very big question. What are we listening to? Who are we listening to? Why are we listening? Where, when, how, and what are we going to do about it? It's a big question. I better stop there, otherwise I'll...
So it's a good point to remind people to get their questions into the Q&A if you've got any. We'd love to field a few of those. I might like to bring Wanta back in at this point. Wanta, you're still there. Look, hey, what are you hearing? And I wonder if you've talked about learning to read the country, to hear the country. How are the ways that ceremony and Wantarri-tarri teach us to do that?
Now you get to see and chance to be with everybody and just celebrate each other. That's what Wantarri means. A gift to each other. You are a gift to them, they get a gift to you. One of the words we use is puranyanyi. Now, if you talk to a young fella or a younger person, they'll normally say, oh, it's listening. But it's not listening. It's not just listening, but it's all of that. And one would, I think there were two other things that were mentioned there. But the third thing is, yeah, you feel the teaching, that you have a chance to participate, dancing and becoming in that animal. That's why I wasn't satisfied with the school teaching Wolfred. Words are words, they could be flying around in that classroom for ages. But now we have to come to a sense that now there need to be some sort of celebration. So kids can be a chance to be their own story, clan group story. And that's what Milbury is. Now Milbury's metaphor is the two winds coming together to form a cloud. Yeah, the hot air rises, meeting the global falling cold air, and they've developed into this, what we call Milbury. That's the name of the festival anyway. It's a thundercloud, full of lightning, full of all the different stages of that, what you call the cloud, right till it grounds itself on the top there. You know, the last bit of the grounding. You know, if the two wind get together, it's usually violence. And the violence lightning, they shoot lightning, they make big thunder sounds, you know. When that's settled, we know the rain's coming. The rain's going to be let go by the cloud. When it does, the top part of the cloud seems to crown itself. That to us is Pukari. Pukari means the crown. Crowns itself for chiefing, you know, as a gardener, chief the watering of the planet. That's a nourishment to the planet. To us, that's it. We need to become that rain. And we can crown ourselves saying, yes, it was fun. We're doing it together. And that teaches a lot of the young people. Now, some of the young people are still singing some songs from Milbury. Sadly, the old people have passed away from the first Milbury. Yeah, there's only one. But that's the metaphor we use. So bringing the known into the unknown, or maybe the vice versa, you know, that's it. The global air, whole air represents global, and rising hot air from the land, Indigenous not. We get together. And the first part of it is violent, but we get to not really understand each other first. But when it's settled, we know we're starting to teach each other and make each other understand how we should go about it, and we become the rain. That's what Milbury means. all that is in the sunlight.
When you make not sure if the right way to put this, but when you're interpreting the Milpiri and the Milpiri story, Djangirrawuy ceremony around reconciliation, but you're also interpreting that with the Christian narrative as well. Is there a sense that you're overlaying these narratives? Are you putting them side by side, or are you hearing one in the other?
No, I'm hearing one in the other. I mean, I talked earlier about Mount Sinai. Now, I read that story when I was little. But, you know, I see this ceremony, when I was little, I've seen this ceremony called Djangirrawuy. Yeah, it's also where the first law come from. Yeah, it's in that mountain called Wantarri-tarri. That's why I call it my people's Mount Sinai. And all these wallabies carrying this big snake. The snake is thick. But that not mean we, you know, when the story goes, it meets up all these different clan groups in the area, and all those skin groups, they got their own bad side of the story, and they give it to Djangirrawuy. The Djangirrawuy seem to fill up the snakes of all that sin of that clan group. They put it on that snake, or that snake becomes the sin. And they go up north somewhere to that island, maybe. Maybe you'll have to ask my younger brother there. There's an island there somewhere there where the island of death. Maybe they took it over there, but I can't tell you that. I'll have to follow them up. Otherwise, if I tell the whole story, I would be colonizing them with my story. And that's it. We be careful about not colonizing. Even when I told you about those two stomachs, how can I talk? Because I'll leave it to the animal people. You want that meat yourself. So you become a really good hunter and share that food when you come back. So I'll leave it to the animal mob to teach you that. The two stomachs.
Jumba, you come over here to Sydney here, and Sydney here has got the highest number of Aboriginal rock art on the planet. And
Yes.
here you've run that emu here too, eh? Remember?
Yes, I've been there. Yeah, I've been there. And to me, I really do, you know, the emu, Guy, I think.
Yeah,
But
that's it.
I don't know the place where I saw that kangaroo being, you know, all these things.
Him there
stuck
too,
in-
yeah.
There's a kangaroo's boomerang stuck into his body and all that. I saw that surprised me. So that Wantarri-tarri, that gift road from that side, it's been active before the white man came.
Yeah, you are.
Uncles, I'm wondering if I could share something from my dreaming with you, because I think it connects with what you were saying earlier, Wanta, those pictures that you were sharing with us. I'm just going to put this up on the screen. Hopefully you can see that. I can't. This is a design that's based on some petroglyphs or rock carvings from a place called Cremengana down in Tasmania, or Loughrey. I can't show you the photos of the petroglyphs themselves, because as a community we don't do that. We don't show outsiders the photos. But this is a little pendant that one of our artists, Bianca Manning, has made based on the petroglyph. And I think it's very interesting. It connects in with some of the stuff you were sharing from your own dreamings up there. You've got this sort of circular formation, which for us is the Milky Way. It's the Skyway, because we have this sense that the Skyway goes from east to west, but it also goes under the ground, you know, and comes around. So we've got this sort of circle idea. So this represents the Milky Way. And then you've got these 4 points that talk about that are the stars in the Southern Cross, you know. We give them different names and they're different ancestors. So we This is a dromedare, one of our creator ancestors. This is Moyani, who's the wombat ancestor. This is Tana, who's the kangaroo ancestor, you know. And this is Radio Rapper, who's sort of like the Tassie Devil, you know. And we have this understanding that, you know, what's going on in the stars is also mirrored on what's going on in the earth, you know. And there's moieties, there's left and right, there's male and female, there's up and down, you know. All that stuff is there, and it's around this sort of circle and cross, which looked to me, when you were showing your diagrams earlier, it looked very similar to this. So even down in Luchawita, right down the bottom of the continent, we seem to have similar sort of ideas, you know. We've got different names, but it seems to me that the symbols and the signs are very similar, and they mean the same kinds of things. So there's a lot to talk about there, I reckon. Yeah,
I could say, for me to call you in the skin name, I'll call you a Djangirrawuy. By looking at that.
Yeah.
They own the night story, the star story.
Yeah.
They own the Southern Cross. Well, they've been owned by something, the night story.
Yeah.
And the circle, the sky.
Yeah.
Foundation of the Southern Cross.
Yeah.
And, the skin name is not given. It's found in a character. Character find it. It's in the land. It's in the land because it's a creation. And that's one that people decided not to read anymore. And goes with the Bible nowadays. But they have each other, understand, come. Yeah, it just takes time. Yeah, like a little seed. In fact, the suicide started, the military started with a suicide. And the young fellow that took his life, he's from the seed clan. And I'm going, why did he took his life? Why? I think it wasn't me, it was the elders too feeling, why did he take it? It doesn't make sense. Suicide is not part of our culture. So he belongs to a seed dreaming. So why not? We have to come up with a seed and military eat the seed. Yeah. So why don't we plant it and start looking at each other's story and value it? Because eventually you are Yongora, and Yongora has a story and history of you. So you are your history. And that's what I think some people need to go back and be who they're born to be. Yeah.
Sorry to interject in here. I'm just going to interject because we've actually got Denise Champion on the line. We're going to give this a go and see if we can hear her clearly. We're glad we can get you here, Denise. Let me just introduce her, though. Reverend Dr. Denise Champion is theologian in residence at the Adelaide College of Divinity. She's the first South Australian Aboriginal woman to be ordained for ministry in the Uniting Church. And for decades, she's been a key leader in the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress. She's exercised pastoral ministries at Port Augusta, Corn, and Salisbury North. Auntie Denise, look, I hope you can hear us. It's great to hear from you. Was there something, I know you were interested in sharing something with us today or reflecting on the conversations that's been going on?
Yes, hi. I'm a bit sorry that my computer's not working. And I've been listening to people's conference today, and my traditional name is Wantarri-tarri, which means that I'm the firstborn and female in my family. And we have a naming system of up to 10 family members. After 10, people do not have a name other than personal names that are given. And this is important because everyone has their place, their individual place in society. In Aviva society, and Adjumant society is a matrilineal society. And all the children born into our Adjumant society take their moiety, take on their mother's moiety or their mother's ancestral line. So they all have their place, and they take us as the mothers. One of the ways that people recognise the connection to country is by, by the recognition of our if you go for a quick trip, I'll just take you on a little trip up to Hawke, about 2 hours away from us. There are two twin peaks that stick out in the countryside. The countryside is very flat and plain, but the twin peaks stick out in the countryside. They are our outdoor pass-through. Our parents always taught. Every time we go for a trip up into the country, they would point out those two peaks, and they'd call it Djangirrawuy, which means two men. And one of the ways that they teach us is they actually represent the two moiety groups. You got my father and mother, and they represent two winds, the north wind and the south wind. And that's very important because that is foundational to all of Adjumant society. And we, as Adjumant children, all learn who we are by looking at our two winds, the north and south wind. The north wind is called, the traditional name, Gumbula-Garawirrtja. And that's the traditional name for it, the north wind. And I'm a woman of the north wind. And we can go back 7 generations of women of the north wind, 7 generations. My grandmother, or my mother, was a north wind, a Irish woman. My grandmother, my great grandmother, and we can go back 7 generations. And and my father's ancestral line is the south wind, the opposite wind. And so that's been something that they, we've had to learn over the years. And it's the way that we traditionally had to learn about who we are. And also it's foundational because all of our everything that we know is based on our speaking. So we've got red and grey kangaroo, and they both take a moiety. We've got Wantarri-tarri, or the evening of old turkey, and they take a moiety. And we have, they're our connection to creation at post. So, one of the reasons why I've gone ahead and it's become really important for me to learn these connections to creation, the country. It's been really important because I started to wonder, and how to communicate the gospel to my own children, for instance. And I knew that the old ways weren't working. They weren't coming to church, and it's very hard to see any of our young people. So, but they are very, very interested about their identity and who they are, and they lament the loss of their culture. Those people that have lost a lot of their culture, they live in that. I thought, well, you know, it's an opportunity to relearn it, to retrieve it, and you know, for our young people to find out who they are. Yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me and what I do. I just think that it's really important for us to to go back and because we've never ever lost those old ways of learning. And the more I look around Australia, I know that there are common threads that each of our groups have, and you see the history of the church. It's only 200 years old, but our spirituality goes back right to the beginning. We have stories that talk about how things were made. We have a name for God, and that's really important that we don't lose any more of that knowledge. And the way to, I believe, the way to preserve it is either write it down or to tell the story. And it's important. The important connection between our culture, cultural stories, and Christian gospel is, you know, I never try and look for any connection. I just always ask one question, and that is, where is God? And if you look, and in Adimata, we always have this saying, Arawatana, our name for God, Arawatana, the Most High. We always say, Arawatana, Arina Nakala Nakala. The Most High is still watching over us. And Adimata people, all, you know, we still say that, regardless of, there's very few Adimata people in church, but they will say that, they will acknowledge the presence of Arawatana in country, land, in history, and we always look for how Arawatana is still present. Yeah, so that's I guess what I wanted to say, Sam, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think you're right. There are many interesting threads coming out today that are interweaving together, especially around wind, especially around Murukulu and the Southern Cross, and the narrative of difference and responsibility to one another in our different connections. So thank you, Auntie Denise. We're actually coming to a close now. I think, is there any burning responses? I think Wanta wants to add a final word here. If anyone else wanted to say something, we've got about 1 minute, Wanta.
Yeah, now people always cut off. I try to mention Mulgari. Mulgari is a dot painting. Dot painting is come from the style of, because the eagle varies his talent under food. Yeah, that's what it is. So when we learn all that, we have to feel the pain of it all. That's why the mapping out, the closest word to Mulgari is navigating. Yeah, navigating it. So that's why dot painting comes from. All that is Mulgari, and that's dot painting comes from a style of it. Is to map each other out, map yourself out.
Thanks, Wanta. Hey, look, Wanta, you're always giving us difficult challenges and puzzles. I think Glenn's thrown you one. I'd like you to go and see if you can find an elephant in the desert. I think that's a fantastic little story there. And let me know when you find that one, Wanta.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, well.
Got to talk now for the elephant?
Go for it. I'd like to hear the elephant, Wolfe elephant.
First of all, it's a foreigner. I haven't got a skin name for it. Maybe if I go to Africa, the elephant can give me the skin name.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't got any issue. I get also and angry because I like Aussie rules. And yeah, you got tigers, you got lions. Yeah, why not get some animal from here? What about the possum, the platypus? all that. We're destroying ourselves if we don't identify ourselves. That's all.
That's good. Thanks, Wanta. And look, thank you all for your contributions today. It's been a rich discussion, and I'm sure you've got many people thinking in new ways, but hopefully scratching their heads and trying to listen in a new way, and asking themselves how they might listen in new ways. I want to thank University of Divinity also for their support in this symposium. Thanks also to everyone behind the scenes, Sarah Backler, Meg Nelson. We couldn't do it without you. Thanks, Denise. I guess that's all. So I wish you all a happy Christmas that's coming up shortly. So we'll catch you all next time. Take care.